Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon to participate in this program as part of the Law and Democracy Speaker Series. My name is Maggie De La Fuente. I'm 27 and I'm studying government and geography. I'm the events director for the Dartmouth Political Union, and I'm also a student assistant here at the Rockefeller Center. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Rockefeller Center's 2025-2026 Brooks Family Lecture, featuring the Honorable Senator Rand Paul. The Brooks Family Lecture was established in 1990 by Babbitt V. Dexter Brooks, 47, of Westport, Connecticut, in order to foster a balanced discussion on campus of national and international issues. Mr. Brooks graduated from Dartmouth in 1947 and from the Amos Tuck School of Business Administration in 1949. Law and Democracy is a series of conversations focusing on foundational laws, policies, and institutions as we approach the semi-quincentennial milestone of the Declaration of Independence. This series builds on the Rockefeller Center's commitment to bringing our community together in discussion with a wide range of experts and practitioners to examine and deliberate on these themes. We are grateful to Dartmouth Dialogues for being a crucial partner in making this series happen. Today's program is also co-sponsored by the Dartmouth Political Union. The Dartmouth Political Union is the preeminent nonpartisan student-led organization at Dartmouth College. The DPU promotes open discourse by hosting speakers from across the political spectrum, holding student and expert debates, and organizing campus-wide discussions on relevant political issues. We would like to welcome our virtual attendees who are joining us today via live stream. For those joining us in person, when we reach the audience Q&A portion of our program, please line up behind the members of the Rockefeller Center staff who will be stationed in the aisle with microphones. Please be sure to wait for the microphone before speaking to make sure that everyone in the room and on our live stream can hear you. The question and answer portion of this program will be moderated by Eli Moyse, member of the class of 2027 and debate director for the DPU. As a reminder, Dartmouth is committed to protecting free expression and peaceful dissent. We encourage you to ask questions during the Q&A, but ask that you do not interfere or disrupt today's program, which would include preventing attendees from seeing or hearing our guest and moderator or interfering with our guest and moderator's ability to speak or be heard. U.S. Senator Rand Paul is recognized as one of the nation's leading advocates for liberty. As a fierce advocate against government overreach, Dr. Paul has fought tirelessly to return government to its limited constitutional scope. As a hard-working and dedicated physician, Dr. Paul came to Washington to make a difference, and he has remained true to his principles. During his time in the Senate, Dr. Paul has never voted for an unbalanced budget, has returned $8.3 million to the Treasury from his Senate budget, and is known for his annual detailed analysis of government waste. Dr. Paul serves as chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, where he conducts oversight and works to keep government accountable to the people. Dr. Paul is a devoted husband, father of 3, and grandfather, and has been married for 34 years to Kelly Ashby Paul. Rand and Kelly are both devout Christians and are active in their local church. Dr. Paul attended Baylor University, graduated from Duke Medical School, and completed a general surgery internship at Georgia Baptist Medical Center. After completing his residency in ophthalmology at Duke University Medical Center, Dr. Paul and Kelly moved to Bowling Green to start their family and begin his ophthalmology practice, where he was a successful eye surgeon for 17 years before running for the Senate. Dr. Paul founded the Southern Kentucky Lions Eye Clinic, an organization that provides eye exams and surgery to needy families and individuals. As a senator, Dr. Paul has given of his time and skill by performing pro bono eye surgeries for patients across Kentucky as well as around the world. He has performed eye surgery as part of medical mission trips to Guatemala and Haiti, where he restored the vision of hundreds of people who were blind with cataracts. Dr. Paul is the author of 6 books, the most recent being Deception, The Great COVID Cover-Up, and The Case Against Socialism. Dr. Paul's entrance into politics is indicative of his life's work as a surgeon, a desire to diagnose problems and provide practical solutions, whether it be in Bowling Green, Kentucky, or Washington, D.C. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Senator Rand Paul to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for that nice introduction. It is good to be in New Hampshire. I think I'm a week late for the leaves. The leaves have mostly blown away, but it is good to be here. Speaking on college campuses, it reminds me of one of my first speeches. It was in Kentucky when I first ran. I'd been an ophthalmologist and an eye surgeon for 17 years and began running, and I was stumbling along and learning to do public speaking. I went to the University of Kentucky. Two of my kids went there, and one of my kids went to Duke. And if you know anything about basketball, there's a little bit of rivalry between Duke and UK. I was actually at Duke in my residency when Christian Laettner makes the shot, with 1.4 seconds to go, and he's still not welcome in Kentucky. So people knew that I had gone to Duke, and one of my sons went, and so they thought they'd make it an issue, and people were, we don't want any Blue Devils and everything, and I showed up. But I loved the headline from the student newspaper after I spoke at the University of Kentucky. They're the Wildcats, and Duke is the Blue Devils. They said a Blue Devil came to Wildcat country, but he came in peace, which I thought was a very clever headline. So I come in peace today. I come promoting peace from the South, and I'm glad to be here. In the early part of the 19th century, as the Industrial Revolution, was beginning, Dickens was writing and others were writing, and really if you go back and you look at a lot of the people who wrote about the early part of the Industrial Revolution, it's all Sturm and Drang, and it's all how terrible and child labor and just, what a mess, and they were worried about it. So Dickens writes, A Tale of Two Cities, and in it he says, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom, it was an age of foolishness. It was an epoch of belief, an epoch of incredulity. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. And I'm like, come on, Charles, which was it? Was it a good time or a bad time? We still have these questions, though, and you can understand him putting forth these questions because at the dawn of the modern age, was it going to be something that was beyond hope? Was it beyond belief? Was it going to be great? Was it going to be good? Was it going to be bad? We know now, we've lived through the last 200 years, that phenomenal things have happened. Things beyond our wildest imagination have happened, all good. And yet, we're sometimes not sure, and you ask people, do we live in the best of times or the worst of times? And people are still somewhat uncertain, and you wonder, how could they be? Have they not examined the evidence? Politico did a poll about a week ago, and they said, are the best times past? Are the best times now? Or the best times yet to be? And it was interesting in that about half of the people thought that the best times had passed. About 10% of the people thought the best times were the times we live in, and about 40% thought the best times were to come. Intriguingly, I guess, maybe, there was a partisan divide. Those who were in the Democrat Party because they've lost the most recent election were unhappy and thought the best times had passed and nothing good could happen. I think that's a short-sighted approach, but I think it's an interesting idea to know and to try to see what people believe. Is it the best of times? So we're going to do a poll. We're going to start out with a poll. How many people in the audience believe that the best of times are past? Okay. How many people believe that the best of times are now? Good. And how many people in the audience believe the best of times are yet to come? Overwhelming optimism in New England. So I asked the same question in Brown, and I asked the same question at Babscom College this morning, and the same sort of response. Nothing like the poll. Now, this isn't a very scientific poll, but it seems to be that people are more optimistic, or at least people who came to my speech are more optimistic about the future than others. But when you look at this, it's an important question because it either is a great economic system that has created this and there is great wealth, or it's a terrible economic system, we should trash it and start anew and maybe try socialism. And so it is important to look at the facts of, is this the best of times or the worst of times? And I think if you look at the facts, without question, it is the best of times. Start by just looking at health. And you have to look at things in historical perspective. I'm not talking about the last 4 years. Oh no, longevity's gone down 6 months in the last 4 years or since COVID. I'm talking about in the last 200 years what happened. Let's go back just to 1900. So the longevity in 1900 was about 45. So we're almost double that. We're not quite double that. We're around 80. An amazing increase. We've almost doubled life expectancy in 120 some odd years. How about perinatal or postpartum mortality? It was probably about 1 in 10 in 1900. Now it's probably 1 in 1,000. If you hear of a mom dying either at birth or after birth, it's an extraordinarily unlucky or thing we still regret, but it's very, very uncommon. Infant mortality, probably 1 in 20 or 1 in 30. It's 1 in 1,000. Childhood mortality was 1 in 3. You can look at this, and it's easy to sort of prove to you. Look at your genealogy, and you go back and say, your great-great-grandfather, or for you guys, your great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1880, and you'll see the birth of first child, died at birth or something, and then you'll see wife number 1, wife number 2, wife number 3, wife number 4. You're like, God, I didn't know they got divorced back then. They aren't divorced. They died in childbirth, and often there are 4 moms listed, 10 kids listed, and 5 or 6 of them survived, you know. That was normal, not just for that period of time, for all time. That was the normal for all time until we get to the modern age. This is how people lived. If we can't appreciate that we live in the best of times with regard to health, we can quibble over health policy, whether we're going a little up or a little down, but we live in the best of times with regard to health. And then you say, well, what about wealth? How was it? Well, there's a chart that the psychologist Jonathan Haidt has said is the most important graph in history. Sounds pretty important to say the most important graph. It's GDP per capita over time. So the x-axis is time and the y-axis is GDP per capita. And we have lived upon the x-axis for almost all of time. All of recorded history, we have lived a subsistence level where GDP per capita is close to 0 until 1820, till the beginning of the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And it begins to climb, and it climbs exponentially. And so the amount of wealth that has been accumulated over the last 200 years is without precedent. Before 1820, everyone lived on a subsistent level. Obesity was unknown. And you say, well, what about Henry VIII? Yes, that was the exception to the rule. Royalty were obese. People had slaves and people to feed them all the time were obese. No common person was obese. Really, even before 1950, very few people are. If you ever see on the internet and want to see the pictures of people in 1920, they're all fascinated. Everybody's skinny in 1920. Get in a car, get in a Edsel, and see how small the cars are. None of this existed because nobody had enough food. This is from time immemorial, from the beginning of time, this is the normal until you get to the Industrial Revolution. In 1820, 98% of people in the world lived on less than $2 a day. They've been measuring this, and they measure it in constant dollars. The World Bank keeps some of these statistics. If you fast forward from 1820 to when I was married in 1990, you go from 98% of the world living on $2 a day, virtually everyone, to only a third of the world. So you went from 98% to a third in 1990. From 1990 to the present, it's less than 10%. Less than 10% of the world lives on $2 a day. Now you can do $10 a day, $30 a day. In every parameter, there's been a miraculous accumulation of wealth. And so the question is, why? Is it inevitable? Is it an inexorable linear improvement in history? Is history always getting better? Are we inevitably going towards something great that is some sort of utopia that happens despite what mankind does? Or was there a reason for this? I think without question there was a reason for this. The accumulation of wealth is related to an economic system. It's related to the idea of voluntary exchange, to the idea that you can trade your services or sell your wares based on voluntary transactions, where everybody's happy by definition. You can only be happy because you only trade things that you're happy about. Adam Smith recognized this at the dawn of our country, and he recognized this, writing from England. But he talked about, and his great insight was the idea of the division of labor. And so the division of labor was the idea that instead of me making my shoes, my clothes, my pants, growing my food, doing everything, chopping the wood, doing all those things, as we farmed out these things and we specialized, one person in the village would make the shoes. And then we found that maybe shoes were better if they were made in Ohio and not in Kentucky. And then we found that maybe they were cheaper if they were made in Vietnam. Through every step, we got richer. We didn't all of a sudden get richer because one guy in the village did it and then another county, and then all of a sudden, when the division of labor spread to Vietnam, we got poorer. No, we got richer at every step. At every point in time, we've gotten richer. And we understood this until about a year or two ago when we gave up on the notion of trade and we began to believe that we had to make everything at home. When you farmed out, when you had this division of labor, you had time to accumulate capital. You had time to sit and think. You had time to specialize. And there's an economist by the name of Julian Simon, and he says that the greatest resource isn't gold or silver or oil. The greatest resource is human ingenuity. It's humans, which is the other reason why we ought to be open to people coming to our country, particularly if you get to select them. If you get to select the best and the brightest who want to come to our country, it's like you are mining the greatest resources in the world and they come to your country. So we shouldn't be afraid of immigration. We shouldn't be afraid of resources. But we also have to understand that trade is an integral part of capitalism. It's not a separate facet. It's not like, oh, you can have capitalism and protectionism. No, capitalism is trade. If you're in my country and we trade, that's just part of capitalism. Just because you reside in another country doesn't make it any different than local trade. But what are the people saying? What are the people saying who think we need to have protectionism? What are the main two arguments? They tell you two things. We're being ripped off, Chinese are ripping us off, and the middle class is dying. They're both true. They're both false. They're both fallacies. The concept of whether you're being ripped off, think about it this way. There's about 200 people here. All of you go out in the next year and you decide to buy a TV at Walmart and you pay $600 for it. Now, if it's a voluntary trade and you walked into Walmart with your $600, you want the TV more than your $600, and Walmart wants your $600 more than the TV, and you make a trade. And the extraordinary thing is that it isn't an equal trade, it's actually an unequal trade. You both think you benefited. It's mutually beneficial. The trade only occurs if you both perceive it to be good, but you actually perceive an advantage to having the TV over the money. You all trade, you all go home, you watch your TV, and you're happy, and you don't think any more about it. At the end of the year, an economist, and not to pick on them, just let's say a confused economist who works for the Trump administration, circles all of you people and puts you all in a basket and says, you all bought TVs and they all came from China. And China didn't buy any TVs from you. So we now have a trade deficit with China. What does that mean? You've been ripped off. But how do you add up 200 individual trades where you're all happy, where you voluntarily parted with your $600, your TV still works, and if I ask you if you're happy, you still say you're happy. But if I group you all together, some other economist gets to say you've all been ripped off. It is a fallacy. It is not that trade deficits are maybe partially correct or somewhat informative. They're completely and utterly without any value. Here's an example. If the trade deficit goes up, what do you think that means for the economy? Typically, the trade deficit goes up when the economy booms. When we go into a recession, trade deficit goes down. So it isn't inversely proportional, it is actually proportional. The greater the trade deficit, the greater your economy is doing. That literally is true. You can look back for the last 50 years, and when we're in an economic boom, we have a bigger trade deficit. It's also sort of, you can think of the fallacy this way. We trade with Bangladesh. Do you think Bangladesh is ever going to buy as much from us as we buy from them? They're a very poor country. We're an enormously big, huge, wealthy country. It's kind of the same with me and Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos buys a lot more stuff than I do because he's richer than I. He has huge trade deficits with that. Well, he doesn't because he owns Amazon. This is a bad example. But it is true that the richer you are, the more you buy of stuff, the more you'll have a trade deficit. But if you look at my personal finances, I have a trade deficit with Kroger. We shop at Kroger, and Kroger buys nothing from us. Trade deficits don't mean anything. It's an artificial accounting. But then you add artificial accounting up with nationalism and patriotism, or a false sense of patriotism is like, you know why? You know, my job, my salary didn't go up for the last 5 years. I'm struggling personally. Damn Chinese did it. If it weren't for the Chinese, I'd be doing better. It's a way of transferring blame for something you don't like. And I'm not saying life is perfect for everybody, that everybody has a job or everybody loves their job or everybody's income is increasing as it should, but it's a way of transferring the blame to a country or to a person. It's very easy to do because we have somewhat of an adversarial relation. And obviously, I'm not a fan of Chinese communism or socialism. I wrote a book against that as well, The Case Against Socialism. But it is a fallacy to say we're being ripped off by trade. One of the reasons people think this is that when you, let's say in 1975, what was the average income in India? Maybe 30 cents a day. And maybe we were $3 an hour in 1975. So we have improved, but they have improved dramatically because it's just more obvious because they started out with so little. But if you look at this, it is a fallacy on the front that we're being ripped off. I'm told we have to get close to questions. I'm going to try to finish this point. The second fallacy is that the middle class is shrinking. So they tell you this all the time, and everybody accepts it. The middle class is being hauled out. The middle class is shrinking. But if you look at household income for the last 25 years, what you find is that household income, if you measure 50,000 and under being working class, 50 to 100 being middle class, and 100 and above being wealthy. You may not agree with the parameters, but let's look at it that way. Between 50 and 100 in 1975 was like 54% of the public, and now it's 51%. You say, aha, the middle class is shrinking. But if you look at the lower class, 50 and under, it was 37%, now it's 34%. So the lower class is shrinking, the middle class is shrinking. Where are they going? They're going to the upper class. There is an upward mobility. The country is getting richer. People are getting richer. Think of your house versus your parents' house or your grandparents' house. Houses are bigger, bathrooms are bigger, cars are better. Everything is bigger and better. We are richer than we have ever been. Now, there are temporary hiccups. In the last 4 years, wages were behind inflation. Inflation rose above wages, and so people did lose some real wealth in the last 4 years. But if you look at the last 50 years, for the most part, wages have risen faster than inflation, and people can buy more stuff and do own more stuff. All I'm saying is that we have to understand some of the things that I think are obvious. Is this the best of times or worst of times? I think we live in the best of times. Health, economic, what have you. With regard to how we got there, I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's fate. I don't think it's inevitable. I think we got there because of the economic system. And the economic system is the system of free trade between individuals who live in the same place, but also free trade and voluntary exchange between us and the world. And I hope we'll get that lesson, remember it, and keep our country the great country that it is. Thank you very much.
Please join me again in thanking Senator Paul for that insightful lecture. My name is Eli Moyse, and I'm a member of the class of 2027. I'm studying government and English, and I'm also the debate director for the Dartmouth Political Union. So we will now begin the question and answer portion of this program. If you have a question, please line up in the aisle behind members of the Rockefeller Center staff with microphones. Please keep these lines for a microphone to a maximum of 4 people each. As a reminder, Dartmouth is committed to protecting free expression and peaceful dissent. We encourage you to ask questions during the Q&A, but ask that you do not interfere or disrupt today's program, which would include preventing attendees from seeing or hearing our guests and moderator, or interfering with our guests and moderators' ability to speak or be heard. So I'm going to lead off. I'm going to lead off with the first question. I'm going to split this down. Senator Paul, you've recently made 2 high-profile votes that broke with your party. First, for Senate Joint Resolution 90, meant to require Congress to authorize more hostilities against Venezuela, and second, against the Trump-supported stopgap funding bill to end the shutdown. In both of these cases, you offered ideological justifications for the votes that were consistent with your principles of small government and conservatism. Other Republican senators decided to side with President Trump, some likely out of fear of his influence. Considering recent actions of the administration and its immense influence in Congress, to what extent does President Trump represent a crisis of conservative ideology? And what, if anything, needs to be done to address that crisis? Thank you.
I do think that we are in a crisis. With speaking as a Republican and for the Republican Party, there's always been a wing of the party that would believe that debt and deficits were bad, spending was bad, we needed smaller, more local government, more constitutional government, more restraint, more checks and balances. And I think the party's become more a party about loyalty to one person. And I think it is a problem because, look, I haven't changed my point of view on trade. This has been the libertarian free market view on trade since Milton Friedman, since von Mises, since, you name it, going back in time to Adam Smith. And, but it's being largely thwarted now, and I think it is for fear. The president, probably more than any other Republican president, gets involved in primaries. He's attacking right now Thomas Massie, who's the most libertarian member of the House, and we'll try to defeat him, and I'm going to try to help Thomas Massie win, and then I'll be up in 28, and we'll see what happens. I figure if they get Massie, they'll come for me next, so I got to get ready. But I don't think it is good to be so much in fear or in loyalty to a person that we aren't thinking anymore about what we're for. On the spending bills, the way it's reported to you is we're either for or against opening the government. I know nobody who is really for closing the government. I know nobody who's for the disruption of it, not paying people. My staff wasn't paid, the soldiers aren't paid. I fly all the time. I want my air traffic controller to be paid. I want him to be, or her, to be well fed, happy, good home life, I want them to be on the top of their game because I fly all the time. So nobody likes a shutdown, but that's not really what we're presented with. I'm presented with two spending proposals, Republican spending proposal and Democrat spending proposal. The Republican proposal, and you don't hear this on any of the news because nobody reports the news, is identical to the Democrat proposal from December of last year. These are the Biden spending levels. They were proposed in December. Many Republicans voted no in December of last year. Many Democrats voted yes. We go to March of this year and then to September of this year, and it's flipped. All the Democrats are voting no for the same spending levels they all voted yes for the previous year, and then all the Republicans who voted against it when it was the Biden spending levels are now voting yes. And so my question, or the way I evaluate it, I said, what will the spending incur as far as a deficit? How much is there a mismatch between what they're going to spend and what comes in? Well, it's $2 trillion. That's what we're headed toward. If this continuing resolution, if the Republican, hooray, the Republicans win, if that spending bill is what we get for next year, you're going to get $2.1 trillion in deficit spending. So I'm a no. But the Democrats was worse. The Democrats would lead to about $3.5 trillion deficit. So am I for keeping the government closed? No, I just wasn't for either spending proposal. Now something has to happen and government needs to stay open. What should we do? I'd say fix the way when we have an impasse, what happens? I think what we should do, and there was a bill, and I voted twice for this last week. The Democrats voted against it, but I voted twice for a bill that would continue to pay people when it's shut down. Salaries are about 10 or 15% of the total, so it wouldn't be like we're spending all the money. We'd be spending 10 or 15%. We'd pay the soldiers, pay the air traffic controllers, et cetera. They would be paid when there's an impasse between the decision, and then we'd fight it out to find out what the level of spending is. But I still think it was worth it. I had a lot of pressure, and an inordinate amount of pressure to vote for this, including from the president himself. But the reason I voted no was that there has to be somebody left in the Republican Party who thinks deficits are a problem, that we shouldn't spend so much. But I do it at my own peril, with regard to the president and his people. But I think it was worth it. Very quickly on the shooting of the boats. When the Coast Guard boards boats off of Miami to look for drugs, 1 in 4 boats don't have any drugs on them. So if you're content with just blowing up people, if your error rate's 25%, go for it. But that's what annoyed me about Vance. When Vance came out and said, oh, it's the highest and best use of our military to blow these people up, I think that was callous disregard for life. We make mistakes even in our country, we're more careful. You will read every month or two, somewhere in the United States, that the court gave permission for the police to go into a home to raid them for drugs. Sometimes the numbers get transposed, they go in the wrong house, and I'm not blaming the police. This is an accident that happens, but even when we're trying to be careful. And they go in the wrong house, and sometimes someone has a gun, defends himself, and that person dies in an accident. So we're going to be certain of boats 2,000 miles from us that can't even possibly get here. They don't have gas to get here. They're not the kind of boat to go 2,000 miles. They may be selling drugs, but what's the penalty for selling drugs in our country? We don't just kill people. And if we find out someone's selling drugs, across town, we don't go with a grenade launcher over there and just blow their house up. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But a distinct minority, and I get vilified, and then I'm told my son or daughter, and I know people who died. It isn't funny. Who died from fentanyl? They're like, now you're responsible for it. I was like, well, you idiot, they don't even make fentanyl in Venezuela. I'm responsible. One, making me responsible for something so heinous is terrible and unfair, but they don't even make fentanyl in Venezuela. Zero, not even an iota of fentanyl comes out of Venezuela. So, I don't know, but I think it's worth standing up on these things because someone has to. Next.
Thanks for your time. I really appreciate your no nonsense talk, you and your father as well. And my question is, you've always talked about the dangers of government overreach and also the executive branch. And it seems like President Trump is constantly stress testing his limits. And in the House and in the Senate, there's not many people to push back on him. So my question is, when will real checks and balances happen, and who will stand up to the president when he does, for lack of better terms, like a bunch of ridiculous things?
Right. I think the biggest usurpation of power has been on the tariffs. He's basically declared an emergency with 130 countries, and he's setting the tariffs by fiat. The Constitution was very clear. Taxes, including levies or tariffs, are to be passed by the House first, gone to the Senate, and sent to the President. I don't think enough people will stand up to him unless there's an economic calamity. I think there are economic problems in the farming community, and I come from a farming state. There's a great chance of farming bankruptcies, and some of them are happening as we speak. He said he'll bail them out with the tariff money. He's also said he's going to give you the tariff money. $2,000 a person. We have a $2 trillion deficit, and we're going to take the tax money that's coming in and give it back to you. It absolutely makes no sense. It's never going to happen. I don't know how he's going to do it, but that will be the check. It'll probably be this. It might be the court. I think the court should do more. And on the court case at the district level, they said it was unconstitutional, his tariff emergency. At the appellate court level, they said it. The Supreme Court has heard it. Many of the Republican appointees on the Supreme Court were very skeptical of his argument. One of the key arguments of the government was it's not really a tax, it's not really raising revenue, it's foreign policy. And yet, what is he saying in public? Oh, it's the greatest tax ever, I love tariffs, and I'm going to give you the money back, and it's raising so much revenue. And then his people are arguing in court that it's not revenue. I think he's going to get killed in there. I think there's a possibility, not figuratively, I think there's going to be a, you have to be careful what you say anymore. I think there's going to be there's a possibility it could be a unanimous verdict or a 6-3 or 7-2. But I think that's about the only thing that would bring them back to reality is that. And they're already shifting their argument to other justifications for tariffs. I think the tariffs have not fully kicked in the sense that I don't think people have, sometimes you have a contract. So if I have clothing made in Vietnam or China and I bring it over here and I sell it to stores, I may have already signed like a 6-month contract. Many of those things are expiring, and as they expire, the new price comes forward, prices will come up. I think it's going to have an impact on the economy. That may be what tips the momentum towards reining in some of the abuses of power.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for coming and giving us your wisdom. I have a question for you. So in the context of the rise of AI, how do you see the government responding to an increase in demand for energy, as well as do you see regulation as a necessity, such as government regulation on internet privacy?
I don't really fear AI. I think that I fear technology in the hands of government, what they can do. It's sort of like when I often would say when 1984 was written, people didn't worry too much about the two-way television that could be spying on you because it didn't exist. Now all that technology exists, and we should be worried about it in the hands of government. But AI, as far as job killing or some kind of technology we should fear, I don't. It reminds me of one of my favorite Dilbert cartoons. This woman comes up and she asks Dilbert, she says, well, I'm very worried about technology and robots, and I'm worried that a robot could take my son's job. And he looks at her and he said, well, I've met your son, and your son could be replaced by a hammer. But on the serious question of electricity, the market will figure it out. You know, if the demand for electricity is greater than supply, you'll have to have more supply and the price will rise. I do think, though, if AI is all it's cracked up to be, that we should legalize more forms of energy. You know, there's a big, huge one they're building in Nevada that's going to be solar and wind only, which is great. But I think you have to be open to nuclear power as well. And you know, recently they voted against 3 Mile Island being hooked up to one that Amazon was going to do. I think that was a mistake. I think we need more power and more generation for this. You know, I don't know what the ultimate answer is, whether AI is going to be all that it's cracked up. I have a sort of a nagging sense that the market is a little bit giddy. Intel's price to earnings ratio is like 3,100 to 1. Now the government, you have bought 10 because your president decided to buy 10% of Intel. Y'all own part of a company that really has a lot of trouble and a lot of problems facing it. So I think if AI is so successful though, and if none of us work, this is what's going to happen. Secretly, there'll be places you can go to work. And it'll be like speakeasies. You'll go down a dark set of stairs, you'll have a code, you'll knock on the door and you say, I just want to work for 30 minutes. And you'll go inside and you'll be able to, like, you know, grout bricks and do carpentry and welding and everything. And at the end, you'll have to destroy it because the government might discover that you're working. But I think there's an innate need to work, and people always will. And I also don't think, you know, people feared electricity, they've feared the automated loom, all these things have been feared, and we usually figure out a way to get beyond it. And the other thing about having more free time is allows more time for thinking, and ingenuity is what is the greatest human resource. Yes.
Thank you for coming, Senator Paul. I'm Will. I'm from Glasgow, Kentucky, and I also have a trade deficit with the Kroger and Bowling Green. I just wanted to ask you, how can you reassure your constituents that since this is now passed, the spending bill is now passed, how can you reassure your constituents that they're going to be all right? I mean, Kentucky has a lot of people that rely on the Affordable Care Act and various other government programs to SNAP, food stamps, that sort of thing. How are you going to reassure your constituents that they're going to be okay?
I think whenever we discuss any problem, it's useful to start finding common ground. So whether it's health care or food for the poor, find common ground that we all want the same thing. We don't want anybody to starve, and we don't want anybody not to have health care. But then we do have to examine the facts. The facts are pretty important. So with health care, you have to look and say, you know, President Obama promised us that what would happen is premiums would go down $2,500 over the next several years. Didn't turn out that way. What happens is if you don't have enough money for your insurance and I give you money for your insurance, I'm now subsidizing the demand, and what happens on the supply curve is the price goes up. And so what's happened to premiums is we're chasing premiums. We keep giving people more, the premium goes up. Then we give them more, and then the premium goes up higher. So I think we have to admit that just giving people money isn't the answer. And really, if you're going to give people money on the low end, and I would say on the very low end at Medicaid level, I think you're better off as a society giving it to them through Medicaid than having a middleman of the insurance company. However, you can't have everybody on Medicaid. So really the goal is to get people off of Medicaid. But if you say that, people are like, oh, you hate poor people. No, I just don't want them to be poor. You know, and I also want to make sure that we define such that we're giving it only to poor people and not to rich people. Same goes with food stamps. So for example, I like to have another poll. This will be the last poll, and I'm going to have to finish pretty quickly. All right, how many people think food stamps should cover Coca-Cola and Pepsi? Okay, some. Okay, minority. And I would tell you that the reason they shouldn't is we don't cover alcohol and cigarettes. And I think Coca-Cola and Pepsi are as bad as alcohol and cigarettes, maybe worse. So I don't think we should cover them. Our biggest problem in our country is obesity. We should not be subsidizing bad food. This is something I agree with Bobby Kennedy on. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, no way. Twinkies, ding dongs, donuts, chips, all the snack food shouldn't be covered at all. Able-bodied people. Should able-bodied people get food stamps? Hell no. I mean, they just shouldn't. We just should have some tough love and go work. Should college students get food stamps? Hell no, get a job. You know, I mean, seriously, life's not easy. College is too expensive. Work. You know, there's no reason somebody should be given, food stamps were for unwed mothers who had 4 kids and nobody to provide for them, and the kids would have starved. And even as conservative as I am, I can agree to that. But you got to limit who you give them to. Same with Medicaid. You can't have everybody, if 50% of people on Medicaid and 50% of people working, it's not going to work. Or if 60% are on Medicaid and 40% are working, it doesn't work. You need to make government programs very small, very strict, and only for those who cannot provide for themselves. That's going to mean, you know, and people are like, oh, well, my mom's 50 and she's on dialysis, she's on Medicaid. Even I don't want to cut her off of Medicaid. We're talking about someone your age, 21, 22 years old, who's healthy and able-bodied. They don't need to be on Medicaid. Now, if they have a terrible cancer or they're quadriplegic from an accident, there's going to be exceptions to every rule. But you got to get rid of the able-bodied people off of these programs, and you don't do it because you hate them and you don't want them to have health care. But we have to have tough love. We cannot have everybody. We've got 40 million people on food stamps. I don't know what the number would be, but at least 10% don't need to be on food stamps. What we should also do with all of these programs is they need to be paid for by the states. Why? Because the states don't have a printing press. I know some of your legislators here. They have to vote on what comes in and what goes out. So if you want more Medicaid and food stamps for people, they should raise all your taxes and then you pay for it. What we do is we offer people all kinds of free stuff and we just borrow it. So everybody should have to pay. If you want to give free stuff to people and you want able-bodied people to have it, everybody's taxes should go up an enormous amount. We're already $2 trillion in the hole, but people don't want that. But we shouldn't have it both ways. And I think if push came to shove and you were told, okay, you can pay $10,000 more in taxes next year, or maybe able-bodied people ought to work, I think you'd get a little more tough love in these programs. We have one more.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Vito. I'm the Turning Point USA president here. And one of the things I've noticed is college students, they love free stuff and raising taxes on like the rich. It always starts with the rich, obviously. It's much easier, I've noticed, to argue against communism or socialism. But one of the things that I found a little harder to argue against, I still can, is the idea of like almost socialist states like Sweden, where it's a capitalist state, but there's just massive taxes and massive like social welfare programs. And how would you argue for more of a libertarian system and why that's better than the European style, whatnot?
In the book, The Case Against Socialism, we talk a lot about Sweden because Sweden's the most popular argument. President Obama loves Sweden. Bill Clinton loves Sweden. They all love Sweden. Sweden's the perfect socialist paradise. And the best quotes in the book are from people in Sweden, like the Prime Minister saying, "We're not socialist. Tell the world the truth. We want to do business with you. We're not socialist." So corporate taxes, what does Bernie Sanders want to do? Tax the corporations, tax the rich. You know what they do in Sweden? They have lower corporate taxes than we have for like the last 30 years. And as far as income tax, they have very high income taxes starting at a very low level, and they aren't as progressive as ours. So if you make $60,000 in Sweden, you pay a 60% income tax. So yes, they have high taxes, they got a lot of welfare, but they primarily pay for it, and they typically balance their budget. European Union, I think it's like 28 countries, 16 of them balance their annual budget. I still don't want what they have. I don't want a nanny state that does all of this with high taxes. I think it stymies and stifles growth. But what I would say is their system is more honest. Their system is also being challenged somewhat as they've had open borders and more people come in that are using the system more often than the people who traditionally live there. But Sweden isn't socialist. They have they have a stock market. They have prices that go up and down and fluctuate. So they're a far cry from socialism. I'd call them a welfare state with high taxes. But in some ways, they compare favorably even to the United States as far as freedom from regulation and business taxes and free trade, frankly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, Senator Paul, for taking time to speak with the Dartmouth community today. Thank you to Dartmouth Dialogues and the Dartmouth Political Union for your partnership with the Rockefeller Center on this program. We ask that members of the audience remain seated until the senator has been escorted out of the auditorium.